All right, let's talk about the marathon. 26.2 miles. You know, it's not just a test of how far you can run. It's a complex puzzle of managing your energy. If you go out too fast, you're going to crash. Go out too slow, you leave time on the table you can't get back. So what's the secret to solving it? Well, today we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to dive into some massive data sets to uncover the clues and hopefully solve the marathon pacing puzzle once and for all. So yeah, this is the big question, isn't it? How do you perfectly, or even just, well, distribute your energy over such a ridiculously long distance? It's the ultimate strategic challenge for any runner. And lucky for us, millions of race results have left behind this incredible trail of data-driven clues. Our job is just to follow them. Okay, first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page. When we talk about pacing strategy, what we're really talking about is just how a runner decides to spread out their energy and speed during the race. Think of it as the game plan for the entire 26.2 miles. So here's our case file for today. We're going to start by looking at the most common ways people run, their pacing profiles. Then we'll investigate a really interesting gender gap that shows up in the data. After that, we'll compare the pros and the amateurs. And finally, we'll decode that mystery of hitting the wall before we put it all together into a blueprint you can use. Let's get right into our first clue. To solve any puzzle, you've got to understand what's normal, what's the baseline behavior. So how do most people, the vast majority of runners, actually tackle a marathon? The data paints a very, very clear picture. So generally speaking, pacing strategies fall into one of three buckets. You've got your positive split. That's where you run the first half faster than the second half. You slow down. Then there's the negative split, which is the opposite. You finish stronger than you started. And of course, the even split, which is pretty self-explanatory, just holding a steady pace. So take a guess. Which one do you think is the most common? Well, the data here is, honestly, it's staggering. A huge review of 39 different studies shows us one strategy just dominates. Look at this chart. A massive 77% of marathon performances are positive splits. That means more than 3 out of every 4 runners start out faster than they can finish. It's wild. In contrast, only 18% manage to pull off a negative split, and just a tiny 5% hold that even pace. And this leads us to the most important question of our investigation. Just because 77% of runners do it this way, does that actually mean it's the best way to run a marathon? Something tells me we need to dig a little deeper. Let's move on to our next clue. All right, our second clue is fascinating. It comes from an unexpected but incredibly consistent pattern that pops up again and again in the data. There's a really clear difference in how men and women pace themselves over the marathon distance. And the finding is pretty blunt. One huge study looking at over 91,000 race results from 14 different marathons found that, on average, men are significantly more likely to slow down in the second half of the race compared to women. It's not a small difference either. Now, this table breaks down the hard numbers for us. It's showing the percentage of runners who hit the wall, which basically means they had a major pacing collapse late in the race. Let's just focus on that first row, the 20 to 39 age group. You see that 17% of female runners experience this? Well, for male runners, that number nearly doubles to 30%. And look down the table. The pattern is the same in every single age group. The percentage for men is consistently and significantly higher. The researchers even used some pretty advanced stats to double-check this. What this quote is really saying is that if you plotted the average slowdown on a graph, you'd see 2 separate lines. The line for men would just consistently show a much steeper drop, meaning they slow down way more dramatically. And this holds true even after they account for basic physiological differences. So yeah, the data is just undeniable on this point. Okay, so we've established 2 things. Most amateurs run a positive split, and men tend to slow down more than women. For our third clue, let's look at a totally different population, the pros. What do the people who actually set world records do? How do they pace their races? And this, right here, is where the case starts to crack wide open. The data shows a complete and total reversal of what we've seen so far. While almost all of us amateurs are running positive splits, the world's absolute best, the record breakers, they almost exclusively run an even or a negative split. They do the exact opposite of what most people do. And this bar chart just makes that difference so obvious. That first bar, for the elite runners, their slowdown is near 0%. Sometimes it's even negative, meaning they actually sped up. Now, look at the second bar for amateur runners. It's a huge positive value, representing that classic slowdown we've been talking about. The visual contrast is just stark. So let's just let that sink in. The crucial point here is that the strategy proven to get the fastest times on the planet is the complete opposite of the strategy used by over 3/4 of everyday runners. This isn't just a small difference in approach, it is a fundamental disconnect between what's popular and what's optimal. Okay, it's time to bring all the clues together. We've seen the common profiles, the gender gap, and the elite strategies. And you know what? They all point to the same conclusion. So let's deliver the verdict and decode what hitting the wall really is according to the data. So let's walk through the anatomy of this collapse. It all starts with step 1. The runner begins way too fast, joining that 77% club running a positive split. This leads directly to step 2. They burn through their fuel way too early, causing premature fatigue. And then comes step 3. They hit the wall, that big involuntary slowdown we saw in the data. The end result? Step 4, a slower finish time. It's a totally predictable chain reaction that all starts without one mistake at the beginning. And we can't forget just how common this is. Let's go back to that number from our second clue, 30%. For men between 20 and 39 years old, this isn't some rare thing. It's happening to nearly 1 out of every 3 runners on the course. It's a direct, measurable consequence of a flawed pacing strategy. So we've analyzed the clues, we've pieced together the evidence, and we've reached a verdict. What does all this mean for you? Well, let's move into our final section and build a practical blueprint based on everything the data has shown us. Okay, here are the absolute key takeaways from our whole investigation. Number 1, the most popular strategy is not the best one. Number 2, the data from tens of thousands of runners confirms that slowing down is a huge problem, particularly for men. 3, the pros show us that even or negative splits are the key to unlocking your best performance. 4, hitting the wall isn't bad luck. It's usually a predictable result of starting too fast. And all of that leads to our final, most important takeaway. A disciplined, conservative start is, statistically, your safest and most effective strategy for a strong finish. And so we're left with this question. The data has laid out all the evidence. It's exposed the most common mistakes, and it's highlighted the path that leads to the best results. You've seen all the clues, you've heard the verdict. So now, knowing what the numbers say, how are you going to run your race?